With Season 6 now underway, Marvel Rivals has suddenly come back in full force, with Deadpool's arrival as well as a balance patch. However, after Season 5.5, I, along with many other players, remain cautiously optimistic about the future of the game, despite last season's questionable balance changes that have affected the meta widely. New, heavy-hitting characters introduced to the game, like Daredevil and Gambit, have been disrupting the existing order of character and team composition strengths to a massive degree, alongside established mainstay meta powerhouses like that of Hela, Winter Soldier, Magneto, and Invisible Woman, who have been consistently bumping up the ceiling of individual character strength to the highest points that we've seen yet in the game's lifecycle. Not to mention Deadpool entering the scene in not one, but 3 different roles, each with respective strengths and differences to each other. Naturally, as a result, there is now starting to be serious contention and discussions around power creep in many online forums regarding Marvel Rivals. However, in this video, I would like to argue that the game is actually succeeding at one of the most meaningful elements of modern game design, allowing players options and increasingly raising the ceiling of what might be considered exceptional play. Outside of maintaining a steady revenue source and achieving what can be perceived as true game balance, one of the hardest things a competitive game can achieve is a variety of experiences and opportunities to self-express within the game's systems. Many long-running successful competitive games only begin to lose high numbers of players concurrently when those same players feel that they have achieved the most meaningful goals within that game, albeit hitting certain ranks, completing elusive achievements, or, most relevant to this discussion, hitting what the players assume is the skill ceiling of their characters or playstyle, as in achieving near flawless gameplay inside of what is determined to be the most correct way to play the game. The simpler a character is in terms of mechanics, the more obvious it becomes when that character is being piloted quote-unquote correctly. Some characters that follow this logic are Rocket Raccoon, Scarlet Witch, and Jeff. These characters are intuitive to play for a new player and have clear distinctions for the purposes of their abilities. While whiffing a shot is never a good thing, characters like these can generally perform without needing a high amount of precision, and their contribution to the team can usually be felt through obvious means. Rocket and Jeff's impact can be felt by their team through good healing, while having fewer deaths indicates a high amount of uptime and engagements. Scarlet Witch's impact as a duelist can usually be felt instead by the final hits she collects, isolating weaker targets and finishing off already injured enemies. Examples of characters of intermediate difficulty when learning to play are Hawkeye, Black Widow, and Hela. These 3 duelists are considerably more lethal than the previously listed characters, with the stipulation of the basic action of hitting shots also being more difficult respectively. That being said, the fundamental skills of positioning, threat assessment, and awareness that almost all characters share are relevant to these characters, but they still each have a dedicated move to temporarily escape or deny their most feared enemies. But most of the mechanical skill that requires actual practice is centered in their aim. For these characters, a good defense is a good offense, and their impact for the team is pretty easily read in the stats via final hits, low numbers of deaths, and overall high damage numbers that are unsustainable for the enemy team. Finally, we can bring out the last 4 character releases of Daredevil, Gambit, Rogue, and Deadpool as inspiration of examples of more difficult kits to learn the game on. Each of these characters have either lots of abilities with a ton of utility, like repositioning enemies or gaining survivability in some form. You can also sometimes have complex combos, extremely short cooldowns on abilities, or have unique resources to manage for maximum output. While positioning and awareness are relevant in a traditional sense for these characters, the difficulty of playing them is more about the juggling act of using fundamental game knowledge alongside niche character-specific knowledge and skills, often referred to as tech, to offset the lack of straightforward options they possess. Due to not having such intentional usages for their abilities, their impact on the game can sometimes be difficult to track beyond the most relevant stats for their roles. There is no post-game stat that speaks to how many status effects Gambit has cleansed from his allies, no stat to show how many dives Daredevil has stopped by watching the proper enemies through the walls, no stat to show how many enemies Rogue has displaced, and so on. Despite these being some of the key unique strengths of these characters over simpler ones, their ultimate strength is in how they reshape the expectations of the enemy team through clever usage of these same unique strengths at the cost of being easy to use or understand. And to add one more great addition to this list to help explain what I mean, I will refer to my GOAT, Exhibit A, Spiderman. Ultimately, if a player's goal is to maximize their impact for their team during a match with as few hours as possible committed to the learning process, the decision between playing Wanda or Spider-Man's kit becomes a non-decision. However, the cost of this type of design is that Wanda could never be truly allowed to be balanced against the numbers of the strongest characters in the game. Her ease of use requires her overall potential to be reduced, so that competitive DNA of the game can remain intact while appealing to casual and intentionally competitive players alike. Considering that at its core, this game is a competitive one, why on earth do so many lower-ranked solo queue players insist on picking the harder hero between these two? And furthermore, why would they pick a less overall powerful character instead of those from the intermediate tier of characters? For me, the answer is simple. Spider-Man is a more engaging hero to play because of the learning curve associated with the character's strengths. By being the more extreme option in all senses, he feels more unique and more fun for players willing to push the limits of their learning. With enough time dedicated to learning the B-hop tech for basic movement, practicing a variety of combos for different types of targets and situations, and even gaining extensive map knowledge to eke out an edge, just learning how to play Spider-Man at a basic level is an entire game unto itself. And so you start to work on a rhythm of engagement that respects how meaningful these resources are to simply existing as Spider-Man, attempting to use the bare minimum of abilities to achieve movement, damage, escape, and moment-to-moment value for your team. What situations call for overspending? How do you budget your web swings around character counters like Wanda or Namor? As individual character matchup strategies start to become more defined, you eventually start looking to maximize your potential based on nuances of the environment, surprise-based tactics, player expectation. When piloted well, Spider-Man gets to play the game efficiently on 100% of the game's playable spaces. Becoming a true expert on the character means starting to understand how engagements will play out in areas of the map that 90% of the cast will never even get to consider. Your unique speed will allow you to approach from increasingly outlandish angles, and all the while you're improving your aim with a projectile that has extreme cost for missing, especially while moving at Mach speeds. The true competitive spirit that allows Spider-Man players to grow must be less concerned with the outcome of each match and more focused on the competition between character choices themselves. Your goal is to prove that you can not only execute on the skills that you have practiced, but to think laterally enough to prove that Spider-Man has individual application in this game. In order to get good, you must push and fail again and again at achieving the pace of play that allows Spider-Man to shine. And despite that, continue to push your mechanical and creative limits with the character. It's not enough to be fast or accurate. You must also achieve consistency and be able to envision what's possible. The path to becoming a competent Spider-Man is a long one, but there's so much game within that goal, so many aha moments, that playing considerably more simple characters from me and many others simply starts to lack the depth becoming of this title. Playing the game of Spider-Man starts to become more fun than playing the game of Rivals. This same individual competitive spirit that inspires Spider-Man everywhere to push the vertical limits of the character can be found in plenty of other games too. Rather than looking at a competitive 5-a-side game like Overwatch or League of Legends though as an example, I can even point to a more unlikely suspect of a game where a high skill ceiling meets the introspective element of the competitive experience. Armored Core 6 is a fantastic mech battle game by From Software that uses blisteringly fast gameplay and a huge assortment of playstyles and tools to exercise a level of freedom that piloting a future weapon demands. Like playing Spider-Man in Rivals, the success of your missions depends on lightning-fast reflexes, mechanical execution, threat assessment, quick movement and good positioning, and choosing the right tools for the job. All while moving at a screaming and unrelenting pace. There's a good chance as a new player that you will die many times while playing this game, but each death marks a meaningful chance to adjust strategies due to the sheer amount of variety in the game. But where I really felt that spirit of competition arise is in the AI-simulated arena battles of All Might. Canonically, by entering the arena environment, you are simply contributing combat data against those of some of the most prominent mech pilots in the game's story. each with increasing levels of difficulty or problem solving needed to engage them efficiently. But what this mode represents to the player is what resonates most personally with me. It's a series of one-on-one, no-hold-barred challenges that pits your mech piloting and creation skills against the opponents, with no healing and no assistance. And these battles are not mirror matches of identical mechs. It's a dense culmination of eat or be eaten mentality alongside of individual player expression. Will you use a weapon that counters your opponent's strengths after you lose? Adjust your approach? Or will you stick to your guns and strategy, knowing that your mech, its weaknesses, and how you manage them define your individual skill as a pilot? Each loss against these enemies helps light a fire in the player to try again, because the process of trying again is not a rote solved equation. And when you finally beat an opponent that you have been fighting endlessly, that same fire can wash over you, reminding you of what it is that made you a good Armored Core pilot. Even in a single player game like this one, the variety of options that enable player expression can be the determining feature that separates a tough, inspiring battle that challenges you to push yourself to your mechanical limits from a seemingly insurmountable slog that only asks for a single solution. For me, the thing that bridges the Armored Core 6 experience with that of playing Spider-Man is the inherent difficulty of playing either is only alleviated by understanding and practice. You cannot become a functional player in either game without dying and losing. Any game ecosystem that requires failure and refinement in order to have any real game impact will push truly competitive players to evolve to the utmost of their abilities, regardless of how tough it feels to lose. Those who reject the necessary negative feelings that come with a lack of proficiency in a skill also reject any possibility of appreciating these minor victories when they simply improve. Spider-Man is intimidating to learn in Rivals not simply because he's hard to play, but because by choosing him, you signal to your teammates that you are always running the risk of potentially throwing a game for them, for your own personal improvement or fun. But what's important to remember is that the same individuals that attempt to crucify their teammates for choosing to play a high skill ceiling character to their expectations also don't have expectations for the game beyond simply winning the round by any means necessary. Their fuel for enjoyment in the game is incompatible with the goal of trying to become better at a difficult or unique skill. And while winning a match is the game's way of rewarding team victory, there's little to no basis of understanding from these types of players of the reward of individual improvement. Even outside of the perspective of simply just video gaming, it is becoming obvious that there's a clear road to monetary success for companies to commodify skill within their products. However, these offers of the means to instantly become good or comfortable with a set of skills is more of an illusion than it is a refinement of the learning process. Ultimately, casual appeal for the competitive game increases as the higher levels of play become more accessible to all, affording all levels of player opportunities to live out their power fantasies in the game. But in the process of trying to distribute good feeling to all levels of player in a competitive endeavor, we risk deadening our sensitivities to what actual high-level expressive play looks like. If there is only a few narrow, correct ways to play a hero because of the way they are designed, then that hero is either solved and pointless except for newer players, or living in the game on borrowed time in the eyes of a competitive player. How do we distinguish ease of use or quality of life improvements, making a game more enjoyable for all, from disturbing the natural progression that comes with acquiring a skill? I think that question is too complicated and has too many answers depending on what game or skill you're talking about. But what I do know is that gatekeeping a skill as a community is almost never a good thing. Usually it only exists as a means by which to bolster one's own ego. As funny or accurate as it is to tell your team's widow that they are your team's version of Zaza Stack, it's detrimental to the entirety of the game's community to punch down on someone who is actually trying their hardest. Regardless of skill level, if we collectively deride and punish the effort of others, then we also have to see the irony of concerning ourselves with the amount of options that more complex characters are afforded, and the responsibility that it incurs. There's nothing wrong with playing inherently easier characters, and by extension, there's nothing wrong with attempting to reach the heights that harder characters can achieve. The moment an aspiring Spider-Man puts down the mask and gives up for good is the same moment that this game gives up one of its key features, diversity of play experience. And that doesn't come from losing a dive hero or two. That comes from the expectation that you must play a hero that has a direct and clear path to victory, and live up to the expectations of people who do not know what you have sacrificed for the opportunity to self-express and contribute to a team in a competitive environment. In 2026, let's try to keep our minds open moving forwards on this game, and on the people playing it. As in the day and age of being forced to fit a job, a role, a responsibility, a path, that through all of this we're still being trusted by the developers with characters like Daredevil, Rogue, Gambit, Blade, and Spiderman. Characters that can give players something to continually work for and push the bar of what is expected of them, and what is expected in a game period. Hopefully, we can continue to see the light of reason shining through, and understand that competitive games can be played casually, but a truly competitive player will always look for a way to further their game and increase the skill ceiling of their favorite heroes. Maybe if we show ourselves to be able to achieve a fair and competitive mindset as a community, then we can start to see changes in the game that reflect well on our desire to play slightly better with each and every game. Thank you.